They say traveling in America is all about freedom, right? Wrong. You think you know the rules of the road, or even just the rules of staying in a hotel? Well, get ready, because I just found 50 unbelievable, ridiculous, and straight up freaky travel laws in the US that could get you fined, arrested, or even banned from an entire state, and nobody is talking about them. Like, did you know that in one state you could be breaking the law just by letting your donkey sleep in a bathtub? Or that singing off key in public is technically a crime somewhere else? Yeah, the actual laws, not the fake ones. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll be checking these rules before you even book a flight. Welcome to the rabbit hole. We've all seen those listicles about weird laws, but those lists usually mix in a ton of urban legends, old town ordinances that nobody enforces, or just plain boring stuff. Today, we're cutting through all the noise. We dug deep into state and city statutes across the US and pulled out 50 genuine, bona fide travel-related laws that are still technically on the books, and they are wild. We're talking about things that affect what you pack, how you drive, where you park your car, and even how you eat a sandwich. So grab a snack, buckle up, and get ready to be completely shocked by the hidden legal landmines that are waiting for every tourist and traveler in America. Now, before we get into this madness, less than 10% of you watching right now are actually subscribed to the channel. If you want to see more weird stuff like this and help keep the channel going, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and tell me in the comments which one of these laws is the most ridiculous. The biggest problem for any traveler is this: ignorance is not a defense in court. If you accidentally break a law, saying "I didn't know that was illegal" is not going to save you from a fine or a headache. When you travel, you expect the big laws to apply. No speeding, no stealing, but it's these tiny, hyper-specific, and often completely illogical laws that can trip you up and ruin your trip. Think about it. You're driving through a small, sleepy town in the middle of nowhere. Maybe you're tired and you stop at a gas station. You do one little thing you thought was totally normal, and suddenly you have a police officer tapping on your window for something you'd never ever guess was a law. Guess. Our challenge today is to expose 50 of these legal traps so you can travel smarter and, frankly, get a few good laughs out of how completely nuts the law can be. We're going coast to coast, state by state, starting with the bizarre things that can happen right out of the gate. Let's get into the laws. We're doing a countdown, 50 to 1, but we're also going to group a few of them together by theme, like driving laws, animal laws, and food laws, because some states are just obsessed with one topic. We'll start with driving, because that's how most people travel across the U.S. You think you know how to drive, but these laws prove otherwise. 50. You must honk before passing. In rural Pennsylvania, if you're driving on a winding mountainous road, the law used to require you to fire off a warning blast from your horn before passing another vehicle. Now, while much of this is technically repealed or ignored, remnants still exist in some older township codes, especially in smaller counties. Imagine the noise pollution if everyone actually did this. The thinking was, on those tight curvy roads you couldn't see the car coming the other way, so a loud honk was your only safety tool. The freakish part is that in some very specific jurisdictions, if an accident happens while passing and you didn't honk, you could be deemed partly at fault. So you're driving your rental car, trying to pass a tractor, and you have to let out a good awooga just to stay legal. It's a road trip DJ's worst nightmare, just a constant series of beeps and toots. 49. No parking your elephant at the meter. This one is hilarious because it brings up the question, did this happen often enough to need a law? In the state of Florida, while the specific language varies by city, a common theme is that if you want to tie up an animal to a parking meter, like a horse, a donkey, or apparently an elephant, you must still feed the meter. The law treats your large animal like a vehicle. If you feed the meter, your elephant is legally parked. If you don't, you get a parking ticket pinned to its harness. This isn't just about horses, it's about any beast of burden. The law's existence implies someone, at some point, thought it was fine to just leave their circus animal unattended and ticket-free. Imagine the meter maid's face when they see a pachyderm blocking a handicapped spot. It's a logistical nightmare for a parking enforcement officer. 48. Don't drink and drive. With a pet. This one sounds reasonable, but the application is freaky. In California, it is illegal to drink and drive while having a pet in the car. Wait, no, that's not quite right. It is illegal to drink and drive in the company of a pet. The law is really specific. If you get pulled over for a DUI and you have a cat, dog, or even a goldfish in a bowl in the vehicle, you could potentially face an additional charge related to animal endangerment or a specific vehicle code violation that prohibits driving drunk with an unsecured animal because the impaired driving puts the animal in danger. It essentially raises the stakes of a DUI when you're traveling with your furry friend. So if you're traveling with your dog, make sure you're sober, not just for your safety, but for your dog's legal safety too. It's like the state is saying, you can put yourself in danger, but don't you dare endanger Mr. Fluffy. 47. Never put a penny in the vending machine. In Louisiana, especially in older statutes that have never been formally cleaned up, there are laws that strictly regulate the currency you can use for certain public services. While they now accept all forms of payment, the penny specifically has been a target of bizarre and archaic laws. The freaky travel law here is that some local ordinances still technically prohibit the use of a 1-cent coin in coin-operated devices if the device is attached to public property. This was originally to discourage people from trying to jam or break the machines, as the penny was often the thinnest and most problematic coin. While you're not going to be arrested for buying a soda with a penny, if a local law enforcement officer wanted to be a real jerk, he could technically fine you for damaging public property. The lesson: stick to nickels and dimes when using those old school parking meters or roadside vending machines in the bayou. 46. It is illegal to drive a black car on Sundays. Okay, this is one that gets repeated a lot, but the specific wording is key to its freaky nature. In some older Denver city ordinances and in some mining towns, there was a specific provision about motorized conveyances being used for Sunday amusement that created this law. The original intent was to prevent wealthy citizens from showing off their fancy, often black-colored automobiles and disturbing the peace on the Sabbath. While no one is going to pull you over just for driving a black car, the law is technically still on the books in certain forgotten municipal codes. The freaky implication: if you got into a minor traffic violation on a Sunday, an overzealous small-town judge could add a fine for the black car Sunday violation, just because they can. It's a reminder that old laws often have a class element to them, targeting the rich and their newfangled toys. 45. No more than 3 persons in a cab. This seems like a straightforward capacity rule, but its application is what makes it freaky. It is often cited as a specific law in South Carolina and various cities, limiting the number of occupants in a taxi cab to 3. If you're a family of 4, say 2 parents and 2 kids, and you try to get a cab from the airport, the driver could legally refuse you, or worse, you could be cited for overcrowding a public conveyance. The original law was actually about preventing fare evasion and also about the safety of older, less sturdy vehicles. Modern cabs can easily hold 4 or 5 passengers, but the old law remains in some places. The kicker: babies and small children count as a person under this law. So, a traveling family could find themselves splitting up into 2 separate taxis just because of this oddly specific 3-person maximum rule. 44. Throwing a ball at a person is illegal. In Rhode Island, specifically the city of Newport, it is illegal to throw a ball or a stone at a person. This is pretty general, but think about the travel implications. You're at the beach, you're playing a game of catch with a baseball or a football, and you accidentally overthrow it and bean a jogger who wasn't paying attention. While this should be covered by general assault laws, the specific statute makes the simple act of throwing a ball at someone, even accidentally, a distinct violation. It's a law that completely undermines the idea of a casual, fun game of beach football or frisbee, making every throw a potential legal liability. If you're traveling with kids who like to play catch, you might want to read the local signs very carefully, because even a rogue tennis ball can get you into trouble. 43. You can't drive a camel on the freeway. Like the Florida elephant law, this one makes you wonder about the backstory. In Mississippi, it is illegal to drive a camel or any other large livestock on an interstate highway or a paved county road after 10 a.m. Yes, you read that right. The law is time specific. The original purpose was to prevent large, slow-moving animals from becoming road hazards during the busiest part of the day. The freaky part is that it implies that driving a camel on the freeway is perfectly fine before 10 a.m. So if you're traveling through Mississippi and feel like bringing your camel from the zoo or a farm for a morning commute, you have a 2-hour window to do it legally before you have to stick to unpaved roads. It's an oddly specific curfew for livestock on the open road. 42. No spitting on the sidewalk. This seems like a general courtesy, but it's a specific codified law in various California cities, most famously in places like San Francisco and Los Angeles. Spitting on the public sidewalk is an actual municipal code violation. While the fine is usually small, sometimes just $50, it is an arrestable offense if the officer is having a bad day or if you refuse to cooperate. The law was originally enacted during the height of tuberculosis outbreaks in the early 20th century to control the spread of disease. The freaky thing is that today, in one of the most laid-back states in the US, a simple act of clearing your throat and spitting on the ground could lead to a citation. Tourists often do this without thinking, especially if they're hiking or exercising, and suddenly they're in legal trouble for a public health violation from a century ago. 41. Illegal to pump your own gas. This one is less freaky and more shocking for travelers coming from the other 48 states. In Oregon and New Jersey, with very few exceptions, it is illegal for a private citizen to pump their own gasoline. You must wait for an attendant to do it for you. This law is generally a measure to protect service jobs and for safety reasons. The freaky part is the fine. If you, a tourist, pull into a gas station, grab the nozzle and start pumping, you could technically be fined up to $500 for violating the state's fire marshal safety regulations. Imagine pulling up after a long road trip, being exhausted, and just trying to fill up, and suddenly an attendant runs out screaming at you. It's a guaranteed culture shock for every first-time visitor to these states. These laws are almost always funny because they deal with animals in situations where they absolutely should not be. These are the laws that make you ask, why did this happen? 40. Donkeys cannot sleep in bathtubs. This is the classic freaky law, but it is real and it is specific to an old ordinance in the city of Kingman, Arizona. The story goes that a rancher's donkey was sleeping in a bathtub when a flash flood came through the town, washing the donkey and the bathtub miles down the valley. The town had a massive, expensive rescue operation, and to prevent it from happening again, they banned donkeys from sleeping in bathtubs. The freaky part? The law is still technically on the books and could be applied to any livestock you might be traveling with. If you happen to be road tripping with a small pony and you use the bathtub in your budget motel to give it a wash or let it rest, you could be breaking a Kingman, Arizona law that was put in place to save a donkey from drowning in a flood. It is a very specific, insurance-based animal safety regulation. 39. All dogs must have a tail light. After dark. In the small town of Paulding, Ohio, there is an old ordinance that requires dogs to have a light attached to their tail or neck when they are walking in public after dark. This was a safety measure to prevent drivers from accidentally hitting the dogs, especially those that were small or dark colored on the unlit rural roads. The freaky implication for a traveler is that if you take your dog for an evening walk outside your hotel or campsite and you don't have some kind of light up collar or blinking tag, you could be cited for walking your dog illegally. It is one of the only dog walking laws in the US that specifically mandates an electrical component for safety. It's a law that sounds like it was written by a comedian, but it's a real small-town safety measure that affects every visiting dog owner. 38. Whale fishing is illegal. Oklahoma is a landlocked state. It has no ocean access. 0. Yet, there is a specific law in the state's statutes that makes it illegal to hunt or fish for whales. Now you might laugh, but the freaky part is that the law is not a joke. It was passed due to a historical quirk. Oklahoma's legal code was heavily influenced by federal maritime law during its early statehood, and the lawmakers simply copied and pasted huge sections of federal regulations, including those concerning marine life, without bothering to delete the ones that were geographically impossible. So if you as a traveler try to import any whale product or even mention that you plan to go whale fishing in Oklahoma, you could be technically breaking a law that exists only because someone was lazy with a copy-paste job over a century ago. 37. No sheep in the cabin of a truck. In Montana, the law states that it is strictly illegal to transport a sheep, ram, or ewe in the cabin of a truck without a chaperone. The chaperone part is what makes this law weird. The animal must be secured in the bed of the truck, or if in the cabin, it must have a human companion who is not the driver. This was originally enacted to prevent farmers from carrying a sick or injured sheep close to them while driving, which could lead to distractions and also the spread of disease. For travelers, if you happen to be transporting livestock for any reason, maybe you bought a prize-winning show animal and you try to keep it safe in the back seat of your pickup, you must bring a friend. The law essentially mandates that your sheep can ride shotgun unless a third person is also in the truck, just to keep the sheep company. It's a very specific sheep safety in transport regulation. 36. You must have a permit to bring a camel across state lines. Texas has a specific, though often ignored, regulation regarding the transportation of exotic livestock, and camels are specifically mentioned. If you are traveling into Texas with a camel, even if it's for a circus or a fair, you must possess a valid import permit from the Texas Animal Health Commission. This isn't just about farm animals, it's an animal quarantine rule. The freaky part is that most travelers wouldn't even think to check an Animal Health Commission's website before driving into a state. If you're caught at a routine roadside check with an unpermitted camel, your animal could be quarantined and you could face significant fines. It's a legal hurdle that reminds you that Texas takes its livestock health very seriously, even the ones that belong in the Sahara. 35. Hunting must be done with a bow and arrow. Only in the city limits of Mobile, Alabama, there is an archaic law that technically states that the use of firearms for hunting game is strictly prohibited within the city limits. The loophole, however, is that it allows hunting with a non-explosive projectile, which means a bow and arrow. This means that if you are a traveler staying on the outskirts of the city and you go hunting for squirrels or rabbits, you must use a traditional bow. If you use a modern hunting rifle, you are breaking the law. The freaky element here is the historical context. The law was passed before modern guns were common and was meant to prevent people from firing loud weapons in the city. The law essentially freezes the legal hunting technology in the 18th century, making your high-tech rifle illegal, but your Robin Hood setup perfectly fine. The law was apparently put in place after a series of incidents where people tried to get moose drunk, sometimes leading to the animal acting aggressively or wandering onto roadways. The freaky part of this is that it's not covered by general animal abuse laws, it's a specific anti-moose partying law. For a traveler, this seems ridiculous, but if you're camping and a moose wanders into your campsite and you offer it a sip of beer, you could technically be fined under this statute. Alaska's government had to specifically legislate against people trying to share a cold one with a massive wild animal. 32. It's illegal to take a picture of a rabbit in public. This law is cited in a few parts of Wyoming, most famously in the city of Riverton, though it's heavily debated how enforceable it is today. The old ordinance stated that no photograph or image of a rabbit shall be taken between January and April without a permit. The original intent was to prevent people from trying to catch and capture images of the animals for commercial reasons during their breeding season, which could disturb the wildlife. The freaky part is that a simple tourist picture, a selfie with a wild rabbit in the background, could technically be a violation. The freaky thing is that a simple chicken walking slowly across the street legally controls the pace of traffic, and a traveler's rush to get somewhere is secondary to the chicken's leisurely stroll. Believe it or not, how you eat, and what you drink are all regulated by bizarre laws across the U. S30. No serving wine in teacups. Kansas has a specific alcohol regulation that prohibits the serving of wine in teacups, or any other non-traditional drinking vessel that could be used to disguise the drink. It's a law that essentially bans charming, quirky, or vintage serving methods for alcohol, insisting that wine must be served in a vessel that screams, "I am wine." 29. It is illegal to sell confetti in place of food. In Rochester, New York, there is an old ordinance that prohibits the sale of anything disguised as food that is not actually edible, with confetti being the classic example. This was apparently enacted after some elaborate hoax, where a person or business tried to trick people into buying colored paper scraps as a type of colorful novelty snack. The freaky travel element here is that if you, a tourist, are carrying any kind of novelty candy that looks like a common object, say a candy that looks exactly like a rock or a fake cigarette candy, you could technically be falling under the umbrella of a law that prohibits selling non-food items that resemble food. It's a very specific anti-prank law that applies to everything from art projects to novelty toys. 28. No chewing gum in public. Several small rural towns in Indiana have town ordinances that strictly prohibit the public chewing of gum. This was a cleanliness and anti-vandalism measure, as people would constantly stick their gum under benches, on sidewalks, and on public property. The fine is often very small, sometimes as low as $10, but the law is definitely enforceable. A tourist could be walking down the street, enjoying a stick of peppermint gum, and suddenly be in trouble for something they do automatically at home. 26. No selling of margarine without a license. Wisconsin. The dairy state has a long history of protecting its butter and cheese industries. The laws against imitation butter, which is essentially margarine, are still quite strong. Specifically, there are statutes that require a special, high-cost license to sell, serve, or even transport large quantities of margarine within the state. The freaky part for a traveler is that if you, a tourist, are driving an RV and have a large bulk container of margarine for your family trip, and you're stopped for an inspection, you could technically be fined for transporting unlicensed imitation dairy products. It's an economic protection law that has weirdly survived into the modern era, making it legally difficult for a traveler to pack a popular butter substitute. 25. It is illegal to sell popcorn on Sundays. In Manchester, New Hampshire, there is an ancient blue law that makes it illegal to sell popcorn on Sundays. Blue laws are those old morality-based laws, usually about restricting commerce on the Sabbath. This one specifically targets non-essential, frivolous snack items. While the fine is almost never enforced today, the law is still on the books. The freaky part is the sheer randomness of the ban. Why popcorn? A traveler stopping at a movie theater or a convenience store on a Sunday could see a sign referencing this law, which is a bizarre reminder of the state's puritanical past. The law basically says, Sunday is for rest and worship, not for buttered, fluffy cinema snacks. 24. You can't throw a pickle at a bus. In various New York City ordinances, there are specific laws about the vandalism of public transit. Now the law is really old, and the intent was to stop people from throwing food at the buses, which could damage the paint or block the windows. The freaky part is the hyper-specificity. Why pickles? The rumor is that it was after a specific, highly publicized incident involving a disgruntled vendor. The freaky part is that if a traveler buys a massive block of cheese for their road trip and decides to cut a slice in the parking lot, they could technically be cited for violating a public health code about food preparation. It's a very specific, don't mess with the dairy law that survived its usefulness. 22. Never. This is an ancient, bizarre public health code that is still technically on the books in some older county codes in West Virginia. The law suggests that drinking water while standing is a public health hazard because of the risk of choking, or perhaps because it was seen as impolite in earlier centuries. It implies that a traveler who stops at a public fountain or rest stop and takes a drink while standing could technically be violating an archaic ordinance. In the state of Iowa, there is a very old regulation that was meant to combat food waste. It's a law that basically mandates a happy, respectful demeanor in every interaction with law enforcement, even when you're being ticketed. Number 19. You can't wear false mustaches that cause laughter. In some Alabama municipal codes, there are laws that prohibit the wearing of a fake mustache, specifically if the mustache is of a type that would incite laughter or public scorn. This was originally an anti-disguise law designed to prevent criminals from hiding their identity. The freaky part is the subjective element, causing laughter. If you are a traveler wearing a novelty mustache for a Halloween costume or a party and people laugh at it, you are technically violating the law. The law essentially makes your comedic accessories illegal based on the public's reaction to them. It's an anti-fun, anti-clown law that can turn your silly costume into a legal problem. 18. All persons must wear a belt. In the city of Charleston, South Carolina, there's a local ordinance that mandates that all persons in public must wear a belt or suspenders if their pants are more than 2 inches below their natural waistline. Yes, this is an anti-sagging law. The freaky part is that it is a city law that dictates how a person must secure their clothing. For a traveler, this means that if you're wearing a pair of overly large, comfortable shorts or jeans and you don't have a belt, you could be cited for a public decency violation. Key in public is illegal. And a local resident finds it annoying, they could technically call the police on you for making discordant sounds. In a cheese factory. South Dakota has a specific and bizarre law that prohibits anyone from lying down and falling asleep in a cheese factory. This was a safety and health measure to prevent contamination and to ensure that workers were not sleeping during a delicate process. The freaky travel implication is that if you are on a food tour, maybe you're tired and you sit down on a low wall in the factory and accidentally doze off for a minute, you are technically breaking the law. It's a very specific anti-napping law that only applies to one very specific type of building. It's a law that basically says, keep your eyes open and don't get your sleepy hands near the curds. 15. You cannot wear roller skates in the bathroom. In the borough of Brooklyn, New York, there is an old city ordinance that strictly prohibits wearing roller skates in the bathroom of a public building. This was a safety measure to prevent slips, falls, and injuries in an area that is already inherently slick. The freaky part is the sheer specificity of the law. It doesn't ban roller skates in the building. It only bans them in the bathroom. For a traveler, if you're trying to move your things quickly around a public area and you decide to use your roller skates to get to the public restroom, you are technically violating the law. It's a law that pinpoints one very specific, and one might say, idiotic action and makes it illegal. 14. You must pay a fee to get out of a traffic jam. This is a wild one. In Honolulu, Hawaii, there is an obscure statute that allows the city to charge a fee to drivers who are found to be the cause of a massive traffic jam, especially on main roadways. If a local officer decides you are the primary cause, you get the fine. Michigan has a specific blue law that makes it illegal to sell a motor vehicle on a Sunday. This is a classic freaky law. In certain rural Pennsylvania townships, there are old ordinances that state that if your house catches fire, the law is meant to prevent the spread of fire to neighbors' property. The freaky travel implication is that if you are camping or staying in a rental cabin and you have a small fire that you think you can put out yourself, and you refuse help from the local volunteer fire department, you could be fined for violating the fire safety code. It essentially mandates that you must accept help from the community when you have an emergency, or you face a legal penalty. These are the top 10, the most ridiculous and unbelievable laws that travelers could stumble into. 10. It is illegal to walk backward while eating peanuts. In the borough of Brooklyn, New York, there is an old city statute that specifically prohibits the act of walking backward while eating peanuts. This law is generally believed to have been passed to prevent people from tripping or causing a distraction on public streets, especially near movie theaters where people often bought peanuts. The freaky part is the combination. Why backward and peanuts? A traveler doing a playful bit for a friend, walking backward and snacking on a bag of nuts, is technically violating the law. It's a very specific anti-tripping, anti-distraction law that targets a completely innocent, playful activity. The freaky travel implication is that if you are a tourist and you take a break on a park bench and start playing with your yo-yo, you could be cited for operating an unregistered device in public. It essentially treats a simple toy like a controlled piece of machinery, all because of some old school safety fears. A traveler coming back to their hotel late at night, slipping on their comfortable hotel slippers for a quick walk to the corner store, could technically be violating a century-old law. It's a law that polices late-night comfort in the city that supposedly never sleeps. 7. You cannot sell the rights to your children. Kansas has a specific state law that makes it illegal to sell your children for a profit. Now obviously selling people is illegal under all circumstances, but the specific existence of this law is freaky because it implies that at some point it was a legitimate enough concern to warrant its own state statute. The law is a stark reminder of the dark parts of American history. For a traveler, it's a law that sounds utterly ridiculous, but it's a sobering reminder that the law often reacts to the worst parts of society. It is illegal to sleep in a public garbage can. This law was aimed at preventing people from using large public bins as temporary shelter. The freaky part is the specificity. It's not just a general trespassing or loitering law, It's a law that specifically targets sleeping in a garbage can. A traveler looking for a quick, unconventional place to rest on a long night could find themselves in legal trouble for a bizarre health and safety violation. It's a law that had to be created to address a very, very strange kind of homeless-related issue. 5. You cannot gamble with a duck. In the state of Georgia, there is a very specific, often cited law that makes it illegal to use a duck as a part of any gambling operation. This was often used to stop carnival games where a person would bet on which hole a duck would walk into. The freaky part is that the law only bans the duck. Gambling with a chicken, a goldfish, or a pig is technically not covered by the same law. For a traveler, if you see a bizarre carnival game that uses an animal, and that animal is a duck, you know that the game is operating illegally. It's an anti-cruelty and anti-gambling law that gives specific legal protection to a duck, and only a duck. 4. You must pay tax on a tornado. Texas has a bizarre and highly specific sales tax law that applies a state sales tax to damage caused by an act of God. This includes things like flooding, hurricanes, and tornadoes. The freaky travel implication is that if you are a traveler visiting Texas and your car is damaged by a tornado while you are there, the cost of the repair must include a state sales tax on the act of God damage. The law basically says that even in a natural disaster, the state still wants its cut. It's a law that turns an unfortunate act of nature into a bizarre, tax-liable event. 3. No whistling underground. In various older mining towns and cities in Idaho, there is an old ordinance that prohibits whistling while underground. This was a safety measure, as whistling was often confused with the sound of a steam whistle, which was a signal for danger or a shift change. The freaky part is that the law is still on the books in some places. A traveler taking a tour of an old mine, or even going into a very large basement or underground parking garage and whistling a tune could technically be violating the law. It's a law that bans a simple, innocuous action based on a century-old safety concern. 2. You cannot be drunk on a horse. Colorado has a specific law that states that a person cannot be intoxicated while riding or operating a horse. While this sounds like a general DUI on a horse law, the freaky part is that the penalty for DUI on a horse is often less severe than the penalty for a car DUI. The law implies that a horse is a vehicle, and getting drunk on a horse is a specific offense. For a traveler who is renting a horse for a trail ride, if they have a few too many beers before getting on, they could technically be cited for a violation that is distinct from the normal intoxication laws. 1. It is illegal to drive a llama. In Utah, there is a specific and bizarre law that makes it illegal to drive a llama on a public road, unless the llama is fully controlled by a halter reins and is not causing any inconvenience to other drivers. The law essentially treats a llama like a highly unpredictable, potentially dangerous car. The freaky part is the specificity. It's not a general livestock law, it targets the llama. A traveler trying to be funny and putting a harness on a llama for a quick photo shoot in a parking lot could technically be breaking a very specific traffic-related law. So there they are. 50 laws that make absolutely no sense but are still technically enforceable across the United States.